I'm waiting now, sitting here with my Colt M1911 A1 in one hand and a shot glass full of some very expensive scotch in the other, waiting to be taken into custody. I set down the empty shot glass and pick up one of the General's cigars and light it up. I puff on it a bit, and the flavor and nicotine soothe my nerves. Yes, I'm waiting for the flashing lights and sirens to blare as the police pull up outside. Why, you might ask? Well, that tale actually starts years ago, when I met and fell in love with Paula Hansen. We were both in the Army at the time. I was in my second year of my second four-year hitch and had achieved the rank of Staff Sergeant, SSG. I was active duty, with airborne and ranger tabs on my sleeve. Paula was a captain in the California National Guard, with a degree in journalism. We met at the club on Fort Irwin one night and hit it off, even though she was a part-time officer and I worked for a living. All I know is that with her gorgeous blue eyes and dark flowing brunette hair, I was smitten. Me? I'm John Blakely, and I had saved enough money during my enlistments to go to college at UCLA with the help of the GI Bill. Paula, as it turned out, had gone UCLA as well, and she still had her house nearby. She gave me her address and cell number and told me that when I got out, to come stay with her while I was going to school. God, she's a tornado between the sheets. During my 4 years at UCLA, getting my own degree in computer science, we were inseparable. For some odd reason, she loved me, and I, for more obvious reasons, loved her with all my heart, soul, and being. I won't lie and say I wasn't tempted to stray occasionally. Hell, I was no angel. But with Paula, I knew that she was the best thing to ever happen to me. Fast forward a bit, and we still didn't have any kids. Not that I didn't want them, but she was still in the middle of her career, and I wasn't going to stand in her way. Hell, she made exactly the same as I did. I took my degree and got a great job at a worldwide tech firm. When Paula got the enviable task of writing a well-known general's biography, she had just been promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Cali National Guard. Hey, let's just say that Jack Nicholson was right in A Few Good Men. I hadn't truly lived until I had a BJ from a superior officer. Oh, and before you go screaming, fraternization at me, we were not in direct chain of command when we first started dating. The problem started when Paula had to go to Afghanistan to get General Peterson's accounts for the book. She was gone for what should have been 2 weeks, and ended up being gone for an entire month. When she got home, she seemed more reserved and distant. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that she had seen some stuff over there that really rattled her. Having seen combat, I could relate and held her close. We made love that night, and after that, she seemed to come back to me. She was once again the Paula I fell in love with. A couple of years later, we moved to Washington, D.C., and that was when our lives really got turned upside down. First, I was headhunted for the CIA and put in charge of their main office's IT division in Langley, Virginia. I was now making better money than I was in the private sector. Paula was ecstatic that I got the job, and she was also ecstatic to be working alongside General David Peterson again, gaining more fodder for his biography. The general had been appointed as director of the CIA, so we were working almost side by side. I got to meet him at a social function that I went to with Paula, and he seemed like a good guy. Well, some things shouldn't be taken at face value. That night was when my suspicions started. I also met the general's wife, who was a very sweet lady, if a bit on the heavy side. I could take at face value, at least. She loved her husband, just as I loved my wife. No, the suspicion started when they danced 4 dances in a row, and his hand drifted downward to Paula's hips during a slow number. That was it, and I didn't give a shit if he was head of the CIA. I'd had enough. I walked out onto the dance floor and cut in as graciously as possible. In other words, I had a fist clenched and was more than ready to deck the son of a witch if he didn't allow me to dance with my wife. Luckily for both of us, he handed her off to me, and I let her know in low, but no uncertain terms, that what I saw of him fondling her but was not cool. Paula just laughed it off and said he was just an old lech. I tried to laugh it off too, but found that the first seeds of doubt in her faithfulness and his honor had already been sown. Paula and I really had it out that night when we got home. Sweetheart, I am sick of that guy taking liberties with you on the dance floor. I don't give a shit if he's head of the goddamn CIA. That does not give him the right to feel up another man's wife, especially my wife. I said between gritted teeth. Stop being jealous, baby. He was just flirting. Paula smirked. She might not have been taking it seriously, but I was. No, Paula, I am not just being jealous. And you did nothing to stop him or discourage him. What does that tell me right there? I said with some malice in my voice. Yeah, I was jealous. But I was also seeing some stuff that I really didn't like, and they seemed to be rubbing my nose in it. It should tell you to trust your wife, John. Paula was pulling the trust card. Okay, no problem. I do trust you, sweetheart. I just don't trust him. I shook my head slowly. Well, he's your boss, so you'd better trust him. Paula stuck her tongue out and crossed her eyes, and that reminded me of one reason I fell in love with her in the first place. I laughed in spite of myself, and she came into my arms, kissing me passionately. I think it's sweet that you were ready to deck your big boss to defend my honor. That's what I do, honey. I grinned, then kissed her again just as passionately as she kissed me. We fell into bed that night and made wild, passionate love to each other. I knew she had picked up on my mood when I'd cut in on the dance, and I think she got a thrill out of it. I knew I could take the old man in a straight-up fight, if it came to that. I still ran PT every morning before work and hit the gym 3 to 4 times a week to keep in shape. The great thing about running in the morning was that Paula ran with me and looked damn good doing it. She kept in shape too, and I was definitely enjoying the view of my wife's spectacular hips whenever I would fall behind during our runs. The only woman I knew with a better one than hers was Talisa Martin, a member of my cyber warfare team at the CIA. As IT director, I wasn't just a tech geek. I was also a fully trained operative within a year. My background as a ranger helped with that. Cyber warfare division handled not just computer hacking, but also other activities, so to speak. Activities that often required a competent covert field operative. Talisa is black and reminds me a bit of Beyoncé, only without the long blonde hair. Tali, as she likes to be called, wears her hair short and in a pixie cut, while keeping her hair its natural black color. Her skin was the same caramel color as Beyoncé's, though, and her lips. Oh my God, those lips. Before you go saying what a dog I am, let me just say that I was happily married and was not about to cheat on my lovely wife. I was married, not dead though. I could at least window shop. Everything got back to normal for a few more months. With Paula transferring to the Virginia National Guard, she was quickly on the fast track and was almost done with her book about General David Peterson. I read some of her transcripts, and I complimented her on a great job. She said that I was just saying that because I love her, but I assured her that if she had screwed anything up, I would definitely point it out to her. She had laughed, and I had pulled her away from Microsoft Word long enough to take her to bed. The only thing that nagged at my mind a bit was that she had a folder on her desk marked Top Secret. Okay, I knew she had TS clearance and all that. Hell, so did I. But to have a TS folder in an unsecured location was a severe breach of protocol. But that night, I shoved it to the back burner in my brain and concentrated on giving her multiple climax. She more than returned the favor. The next morning, I asked her about the top secret file. Oh, that's been declassified, she said dismissively. Oh, what operation was it? I asked. It's the craziest thing. She laughed. Some World War II operation called Wolfbane, where a U.S. Army Ranger attached to the OSS and a British SIS operative supposedly went into Hitler's bunker and executed him along with a bunch of werewolves. I think it was written up as a joke, she said, giggling. I laughed too, as it would have made a hell of an April Fool's Day gag. What was the Ranger's name? I asked, chuckling. First Lieutenant Colton Drake. She smirked. Like anyone would actually believe that. The SIS agent's name was Miriam Brindle. We laughed and joked about the fake operation, which included a report from General Patton, who must have been in on the joke. We looked at the file together and laughed at the thoroughness of the joke. My suspicions were alleviated for the moment. Something in the back of my mind just felt something wasn't right, though. I just couldn't put my finger on it yet. The next Monday at work, Talisa showed up and found me chuckling to myself. Okay, boss, what's the joke? She gave me a raised eyebrow as she stood there with her arms crossed and her hip thrust out to the side. Just an old declassified file that Paula brought home. I grinned, telling her about the supposed operation during the last days of the war in Europe. She broke down laughing when I told her about the fake report from General George S. Patton. We spent most of the morning joking about it and troubleshooting some systems when they showed that attention was needed. The rest of my team took care of most of it, and my gut feeling that something was off came back after a few hours. Talisa noticed that something was wrong. I keep my emotions hidden pretty well under most circumstances, but this just kept nagging me. Talisa could tell, as she could read people better than just about anyone around. She came into my office and closed and locked the door behind her. Okay, boss. Spill it. What the hell is going on? I sighed. Tali, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Understood? I looked at her. Understood, John. She nodded. Everyone called me John or boss. I didn't mind. Talisa called me boss more than anyone else in our little corner of Langley. She only called me John when she knew that something was important. Okay, I think Paula might be thinking of cheating on me, if she hasn't done so already. I spit it out, giving it to her straight. Her eyes bugged out. She better not. Shit, if she cheats on a fine white boy like you, I'll pick you up and show you what real lovin' is. She gave me a grin. But seriously, boss, do you really think she would do that to you? My expression told her everything she needed to know about my feelings. From what I saw at the general's dinner the other night, yes, I do believe she would. I went on to describe in detail how she had been dancing with General Peterson, our big boss, and her attempts to convince me that it was just him being a dirty old man. He could have just been drunk. Talisa shrugged, even though she knew the absurdity of that as soon as the words left her mouth. She grimaced when she realized that the general didn't drink. You know that he did it on purpose, I said flatly. She nodded. Yeah, he would have had to. She said, damn, John, they both basically dissed you in front of all those people. That was something that I didn't really want to think about. Yes, they had both disrespected me in front of a lot of our friends and co-workers. Talisa hadn't been there that night. Tali, what I'm about to do is off the books and of questionable legality. If you don't want to get caught in the crossfire, leave my office now. I looked her straight in her dark brown eyes. Her full lips were set in a determined line as she met my gaze steadily. And? I'm with you, John. Whatever it is, I'm with you. She nodded. You might not be when I tell you what I'm going to do. I warned her. Just tell me, and whatever you say doesn't leave this room. She sat down across from me at my desk. Thanks, Tali. I smiled. I then outlined my plan to her, and she nodded support for each point. After 15 minutes of ironing out the finer points of my plan, she added a few more things we could do. I was reminded how good a friend she was, and how much she took her job seriously. What it boiled down to was if Paula and General Peterson were having an affair, it could compromise national security. For those of you that say private lives don't have a bearing on professional lives, I'll just say this. In the world of international intrigue and national security, yes, they do. If a hostile foreign power gets wind that the director of the CIA is having an affair with his subordinate's wife, you can bet your life that same hostile foreign power is going to do anything and everything in its power to compromise said director of the CIA, or compromise the subordinate and his wife. Blackmail is a powerful and accepted tool in the spy game. My job now wasn't just to divorce her if the previously supposed affair was going on. My job now included securing the safety of my country. If that meant outing the director and my wife, so be it. If nothing was going on, so much the better. But I wasn't going to take the chance that nothing was going on. Too much had nagged at my mind since the other night. Talisa and I figured that we should keep this op between us and keep everyone else in the dark. I set up a dummy email account and used the system here to tap into the general's and my wife's phone lines. It's usually the purview of the NSA to monitor communications like this, but here at the CIA, we had the same equipment for the same purposes. Gotta love the redundancies of Homeland Security. We set up the monitoring and proxy servers for what we were going to do. I was able to set up VPNs to the director's computer and Paula's home computer as well. I could now look over their shoulders and see whatever they were doing on their computers. I also set up my own laptop to record everything they did. As head of IT, I was able to do that without drawing suspicion. It's relatively easy to say that I was just monitoring the systems for any suspicious activity. Besides, I had the software available to wipe my hard drive in seconds, if needed. Part of me felt like I was betraying them, but not that big a part. I knew that if something was going on, I would be doing my duty to protect my country. I would also be gathering evidence in case the general's wife and I would need it for a divorce. Talisa also implemented plans, cloning the general's cell phone while I cloned Paula's cell that night at home. She also gave me the requisitioned surveillance equipment for my house, where I bugged my home phones. Talisa went undercover at the general's house for the same purpose and implanted bugs in their home phones as well. She also set up the monitoring software to pick up keywords that would indicate something other than professional behavior. Those files would then be emailed to the dummy email account that I had set up, just in case. I also set it up so that I could access that account from anywhere with wireless internet capabilities. It took 2 days to set everything up, and business went along as usual. I had my cell phone set up to receive alerts if any of the files got sent to my new email account. Paula's and the general's cell phones were never used for anything even remotely resembling sexual activity. It was all kept professional. The week after that, Benghazi happened. That was a clusters hit from the word go. 2 private contractors and our U.S. ambassador to Libya died that night. It isn't my place to say whether or not everything was done that could have been done, but that was the point where the shit hit the fan. You see, that night, Paula was out with the girls in her Virginia National Guard unit, or so she said. Also, When the excrement hit the rotating oscillator, General David Peterson was also incommunicado. His cell phone was turned off. It was at this time that I got a series of beeps on my phone from the email account for incoming mail. Talisa had set it up on a 24-hour update, which I had agreed to at that time, as anything more frequent could have been difficult to explain during dinner or something. So it was set up for midnight, when my phone was usually off, and I could check it in the morning once in the safety of my office. That night, however, I was wide awake and waiting on Paula to get home. When I checked the emails, I just about threw my iPhone across the room. I calmed down and called Talisa instead. "Hey John, what's going on?" she asked with a yawn. "I'm forwarding these emails to you, Tali. Tell me what you think," I said, then sent them to her from my laptop through the proxy servers. She read them, and she was silent for a while before letting out a "holy shit" when she got the sexting emails between Paula Blakely and David Peterson. "That's about the size of it, sweetie," I said. I was seething with rage and already planning to name the sorry a-hole in the divorce proceedings and to share all of this evidence with Diana Peterson at my earliest opportunity. But first things first, as they say. After cementing the next phase of our plan, I told Talisa to keep a low profile, and I would take the heat round for this one, if anything bad happened. It was after 300 hours when Paula finally got home. I was sitting up with a beer in one hand and a sheaf of papers in the other. I had printed out all of her emails between her and the general from the previous day. "Oh, honey, you're still up?" she asked, a surprised and somewhat guilty look on her face. "Yep, waiting on you, baby," I said with a bit of sarcasm in my voice. "Have fun with the general." "Oh, I mean girls?" I asked, grinning with no mirth whatsoever. "What are you talking about, John? You've been drinking." She tried to bluster. "I'm talking about this right here, my darling faithful wife," I said, standing and handing her the emails I'd printed out. Each one had complete replies from General David Peterson, director of the CIA, detailing what they were going to do tonight in sexy emails that, if they had been texts, would have been sexting. She gasped as she read each one, but her response wasn't what I had expected. "You spied on me?" she shrieked. "No, I'm so sorry," or "honey, let me explain." She went right on the offensive. "Wow, I catch you cheating on me. Have already emailed these to a lawyer in preparation to divorce you, and all you can do is accuse me of spying on you? Go to hell," I shouted at her. "Oh, and don't worry about your boyfriend. He's going to be sued for alienation of affection, and I'll be naming him in our divorce paperwork." I said that in a more conversational tone, giving her a nasty smile. "What have you done?" she said. "I've already sent your emails to Mrs. Peterson, too. She'll probably be filing for divorce on Monday, unless she's okay with him cheating on her." I gave her a more benign smile at that. "Tell me, Paula, did she or I deserve what you and your a-hole boyfriend did to us?" But she had stopped listening and was on the phone immediately. "Yes, it's me. John knows. He's already sent the emails to your wife." "I know. What are you going to do about it?" "Okay, fine." She smiled at me as she hung up. "Let me guess, I'm fired?" No big surprise there. I smiled back. "Worse than that, traitor." She smiled triumphantly at me. She was still unaware that her phone conversations were still being recorded. No problem there. I would have it tomorrow night at midnight. But she didn't need to know that yet. "Traitor? Me? You two are the ones putting national security at risk." I shot back. "The director of the CIA, having an affair with the wife of one of his subordinates. Do you even realize what would happen if a hostile foreign power found out about that? Do you realize that you, I, or even General David Dushabag could be compromised? With everything out in the open, at least there won't be any blackmail to make you do what they want." Paula's face paled at that. "Yeah, cheaters never plan for worst-case scenarios." I walked over to where my gym bag was and picked it up. "While you think about how you've ruined our marriage, your career, your lover's career, and how you nearly caused a breach in this country's security, Paula, also think about the pain you've caused me, Mrs. Peterson, and their children. At least we don't have kids." With those words, I left her sobbing as I left the house and walked out to my '79 Camaro Z28. The red paint with the twin racing stripes down the length of the body was still my baby. My dad had helped me restore the classic sports car back when I was in high school. He'd bought me the body for my 14th birthday, and by the time I was 16, we had it fully restored. The first time I drove it after getting my license, I was pulled over for speeding. The cop let me off with a warning, and I took that warning to heart. I slowed the hell down until I could be sure that no cops or traffic cameras were around. I tossed my gym bag into the back seat, started the powerful 350 V8, and peeled out of the driveway. I'd backed in for a quick getaway and enjoyed squealing the tires as I gunned the engine. In my bag were several changes of clothes, some personal items, and my Colt M1911 A1.45 ACP pistol. I love my grandpa's old service weapon. It's had a couple pieces replaced over the years, but it's still in perfect working order with the original barrel, grips, trigger, hammer, and slide. I made it 15 miles toward my safe house before they found me. I saw the black SUVs in my rear view as they closed with me quickly. I gunned the powerful small block and watched the needle climb to over 120 miles per hour. I couldn't resist the grin that split my face as I drove like a bat out of hell, leaving those SUVs in the dust. No, the main problem wasn't the FBI pigs behind me. It was the FBI chopper pacing me and keeping its spotlight on me as I drove. So, when I pulled over to the side of the road, got out, grabbed my pistol and started squeezing off rounds at the bird, it veered away. I saw, much to my surprise, the spotlight shatter from probably the luckiest shot in history. I couldn't help but laugh at that and got back in my car as I heard the SUVs trying to catch up. I gunned it again, put on my night vision goggles, and cut the lights on my Camaro. 75 miles later, I pulled off the road onto a dirt road that led to my safe house. Now, to clarify a few things, the CIA has no jurisdiction to operate within the United States of America. In fact, it's illegal for the CIA to do so. And if you believe that the CIA doesn't operate within the United States of America, just because it's illegal, you really do need to get your head out of your anus. Thus, ended the lesson. With that in mind, I had appropriated an old CIA black site in rural Virginia to use as my safe house. It looked like an old farmhouse, dilapidated and crumbling. The farmhouse itself was supposedly once a stop along the Underground Railroad before and during the Civil War. Once I had the codes for the site, I deleted it from the CIA registry. That was one of the things I had done to plan for this contingency. Being director of the CIA, General David Peterson had vast resources at his beck and call. Basically, he could call upon all branches of Homeland Security if he needed them. Well, with me on the loose with a lot of evidence that could end his career, he figured he needed them. When I had sent the emails to Diana Peterson, I sent them from my main email account. My dummy account was still clean. I sent Talisa an email to her new dummy account, letting her know where I was. I know the old adage, trust no one, but that doesn't go very far, really. I had to trust someone, and the only one I could trust was Talisa Martin. I then sent, from a coffee shop in a nearby town and from a second dummy account, the emails that General Peterson and Paula Blakely had sent back and forth. I had grown my beard out some and wore a hat and dark sunglasses. Spy Disguise 101. Where did I send them? Every major news network, and even Fox News. I also sent recordings of the conversation Paula had with A-Hole the night I discovered what they had been doing. I was now the subject of a worldwide manhunt being conducted by the CIA, FBI, and NSA. My Camaro was safely hidden in the underground garage back at the black site. I was riding an old Harley Panhead that I had found in the underground garage. With my new scraggly look, the bike fit me better than it would have before. Talisa kept me apprised of developments on the home front. She said that A-Hole had talked his wife out of divorce for the time being, and so far, none of the news networks had run my evidence. Even Fox News was holding back for some odd reason. She used her burner phone, and I used mine. We were pretty well untraceable, that is unless the NSA had voice recognition software going, which they probably did. In a great show of solidarity, all of my IT team had resigned upon hearing about what happened, and because I had forwarded all the emails to them as well. Once they heard that I was the subject of a manhunt, they decided that they would go into business for themselves. Good men and women, all of them. It was a few weeks in, and I still had enough canned rations to last me another 5 years, when Talisa showed up at the safe house. She showed up unannounced. So when she opened the door into the bunker from the underground garage, she found herself staring down the barrel of a .45 that I held. Okay, I take it you don't like visitors? She squeaked. I dropped the weapon to my side. You could have called ahead first. I growled, then chuckled. She threw herself into my arms, hugging me tight. Sorry, John. I didn't want to take the chance of the NSA tracing my call to you. What about tails? You know you were probably followed, right? I said. I lost them. She replied with a self-satisfied smirk. She then leaned forward and gave me a kiss on the cheek. You need a shave. I'll shave when I don't need to live on the lam anymore. I smirked back. What brings you by? I asked finally. I just wanted to see you and make sure you're okay, she said as she let me go and followed me into the living room. We sat on the couch together and I looked at her. God, she's gorgeous. That can't be the only reason. What's going on back at the camp? I asked, referring to Langley. Shit, and more shit. She rolled her eyes. The main news networks are finally investigating your claims and evidence, though. So far, your fugitive status has been kept from the press, which is both good and bad. Good because they aren't using the news to get my picture out to find me, and bad because once word got out, they would have to take my evidence seriously. I nodded my understanding. What are you going to do? She asked. I really didn't have any idea anymore, to be honest. I could wait it out and see how long it took the a-hole to finally try to get the local law enforcement to look for me. Or I could force the issue and head up to New York and make a surprise appearance on the Today Show. No, that would be too risky. The news people had my photo, and that I wasn't available for comment, but nothing on the manhunt that was being conducted by Homeland Security. I was simply if I was cornered on some lonely stretch of road. They could make me disappear real quick. I needed something that was a sure thing. I looked at her and smiled. I'm going to cut the head off the snake? Her mouth opened in shock. John, you can't. She gasped. If you kill him? Her voice trailed off as she shook her head. Tali, do you trust me? I asked, looking her in the eyes. Of course I do. She nodded once. Then trust me now, I said, and took her in my arms. She tilted her chin up and our lips met in the most sensual kiss I've ever had with any woman in my life. Our tongues danced together as her arms came up and encircled my neck. She moaned into my mouth as we kissed passionately. She didn't feel the needle that I pushed into her voluptuous derriere, but the tranquilizer took effect immediately. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I have to do, you can't be a part of. I whispered as I picked her up and carried her into the bedroom. I laid her out on the bed and checked her pulse to make sure I didn't give her too much. She was breathing regularly, and her heartbeat was strong. Good. I smiled and kissed her lips tenderly, then I walked out. Now I felt like Rick in Casablanca, walking out on a woman who truly loved me. I felt like shit, but I didn't want her caught in the crossfire. I grabbed some weapons and ammo from the arsenal inside the bunker, as well as 2 sets of handcuffs. I had test-fired some of the 9mm ammo with the Uzi and HK MP5 suppressed. It was still in decent condition, with no misfires. They would do if needed. I chose the suppressed MP5 SMG and loaded up my Colt with some .45 ACP rounds. I holstered my weapon, slung the MP5, and walked out to the underground garage. I debated taking the Harley, but I would definitely be pulled over if they saw the HK slung on my back. I could also take Talisa's car, but decided against that too. I didn't want anything I did tonight to come back on her. So I opted for my trusty Camaro. I figured that if I died tonight, or if I was captured, I would at least have one last drive to remember. I smiled as I opened the door and tossed the SMG onto the passenger seat. I buckled up, started her up, and listened to the rumbling purr of the engine as it begged me to let the horses run. I hit the garage door opener and drove up the ramp and out into the dusk of Central Virginia. I put on my NVGs again and ran dark as I opened her up full. I made one call from my burner phone before I got to my destination. I identified myself and said that all would be made clear if they met me at a certain address. Soon I was in General Peterson's neighborhood and pulled up in front of his house. I parked crossways behind Paula's car in front of the garage. No matter which car tried to leave, it would have to run over mine to get out. Paula was here too. That just made what I had planned even better. I grabbed the HK and made my way quickly up to the front door. I rang the bell and waited with the SMG at the ready. Diana answered the door and gasped. I put my finger to my lips in the universal shush gesture, and she just nodded, her eyes wide with shock. I entered and she backed up a bit with her hands raised. I leaned forward and whispered to her, Diana, you have nothing to worry about. You're the only innocent one here. I nodded and gave her a smile. I'm not going to kill anyone if I can help it. Okay. She gulped and nodded. I guess so. She said, Ma'am, you just have to trust me. I'm not going to kill either of them, but they've been cheating on us for quite a while. I said in a serious tone. She nodded again and gave me a nervous smile. I slipped my left hand into my pocket and started the recorder going. I motioned for Diana to precede me into the living room where douchebag and my 304, soon-to-be ex-wife were sitting. He smiled at her when she walked in ahead of me, but the smile froze and disappeared when he saw my ragged appearance and the firepower I was holding. The traitor himself, he shouted, but I leveled my weapon at him before he could rise. Is that what you told your loving wife, a-hole? I growled. That my proof of your adultery was nothing more than me trying to undermine national security? Paula paled, having heard what I said to her the night I left home. We can explain, baby. She wheedled. No, you can't explain which. If anyone is a traitor here, it's you too. I spat out. Now, strip? I shouted in my best command voice. General Peterson looked like he wasn't going to comply, so I shot the phone between them before he could react. The suppressed MP5 made a puff sound as the bullet destroyed the house phone. Paula was already stripping her clothes off, and the general was complying as well. Wow, Paula, you must not have been cheating on me because of his size. I laughed harshly at the general, who was a good solid 2 inches soft. He would get to maybe 5 hard if he was lucky. Paula blushed and looked away in shame. But even naked and scared, she was still a gorgeous woman. Well, soon the entire world would see just how gorgeous she was naked. What are you going to do? Diana asked. Well, I think that they need to be humiliated somewhat. Don't you agree? I asked with a smile. Actually, I think I do agree. I noticed that neither one of them tried to deny the affair when confronted with it directly. Diana had a smirk on her face as she looked at her naked hubby. You creep. I hope you get fired for this. She sneered at his littleness. Like you ever kept me satisfied with that little thing. I had to grin at that one. Knock him down a few pegs. Good job, Diana. Now, what happens next depends on you telling me the truth. Since we know for a fact that the affair has been happening, I'm going to ask a series of questions. Your honesty is going to decide your fate. Just know that I've learned a lot more than you might think over the last several weeks. I smiled, giving them my best bluff. They nodded their understanding, and Diana went over and slapped her husband across the face. He took it, since I had trained my weapon on his head. He glared at me. Oh no, sir. Don't glare at me like that. You and my soon-to-be ex-wife brought this on yourselves. You tried to use me as a scapegoat when I got the goods on you, just so you wouldn't be seen as a threat to national security, right? I said. It wasn't supposed to be that way, son. Douchewad said. Don't you dare call me son. I growled, aiming once again at his head. How was it supposed to be, then? Care to enlighten me? You were never supposed to find out? He said evenly. Of course I wasn't. Just out of curiosity, how long have you two been screwing? I asked, all pretense of civility dropped. For years. Paula said sheepishly. Since your first trip to Afghanistan. I confirmed, and she nodded. Yes. I'm so sorry, John. She said with a pleading look in her eyes. Sorry you got caught, right? I snarled. I know my almost ex-hubby is sorry he got caught. Diana exclaimed, then reached down and grabbed him by the balls. She squeezed and squeezed, and his face went red with pain and humiliation as his wife squeezed his balls until he fell to his knees in agony. I bet that hurt. I smirked. No bet here, Diana replied, then looked at me as she moved back and away from General Peterson. John, could you do me a favor and shoot my husband's little bird off? She asked. I don't know if I could hit something that small, but I could give it a try. I grinned at her, and she started laughing. Stop it, Paula shrieked. You have your confession. Just let us go. She was begging now. Sure, go ahead. I shrugged. But you will leave this house naked. I told her, then went forward and withdrew the first set of handcuffs from my pocket, slapping them on her as she stood there in shock. I pushed her towards the front door. When she got to the door, I opened it and shoved her outside, right into the lights from the news van parked on the street. Her hands were cuffed behind her back, so in an attempt at modesty, she fell to the grass and curled up in a ball. I laughed, as did Diana when she looked out the peephole in the door. Diana, leave out the back. You don't need to be here for what is about to happen. For your own dignity, it would be best if you left. I told her, go out the back and around to the other side gate around the corner. Trust me, I am not going to kill your husband. I trust you in this. John, you're a good man. She gave me a hug and kiss on the cheek. She headed towards her kitchen and the back door while I walked back into the living room, pulling the second pair of cuffs from my pocket. General Peterson was still trying to rise from his wife's ball-busting when I reached him and effortlessly cuffed his hands behind his back. Now, General, it's time for your day in the spotlight. I snarled as I walked him to the front door, his limp very pronounced from what Diana had done to him. I opened the door and shoved him outside, and he tumbled into the grass beside a still-stricken Paula. I waved to the camera crew from the door, and then closed and locked it. I shut off all the lights and headed towards the general's home office. And so here I sit, waiting for the authorities to show up. The news people must have finally called 911, as I sat there drinking the general's scotch and smoking one of his Cuban cigars. Damn it, if I was going to be summarily executed or hauled off to jail. I was going to enjoy myself a bit before that happened. I sat with my Colt on my knee, sitting there. It gave me a sense of peace. The old pistol had seen a lot of action over the last century. It had been made in 1912 and was one hell of a weapon. It had seen action in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. I had carried it since my dad gave it to me after my grandpa died. I smiled as I looked at it. The only thing I regretted was knocking Tali out before I set off on this stupid crusade. I just hoped she could find it in her heart to forgive me. I was bounced from my reverie by the phone on the general's desk ringing. I picked it up. This is General Dickhead's den. I'm afraid the general is indisposed at the moment. May I take a message? I leaned back and put my feet up on his desk as I took another puff from the Cuban stogie. Mr. Blakely? Mr. John Blakely? The man's voice asked. Yep, John Blakely here. Who's this? I replied. I'm Patrick Lackland, Channel 10 News. I'm talking to you from across the street. Can you tell us why you've stripped your wife and former boss naked and thrown them out of his house? He said. I gave him the lowdown on the entire situation. I told how I was now the subject of a worldwide manhunt thanks to the evidence that my wife and the general were having an affair. I also stated that I had even more proof now than before, including their confessions that they set me up to take the fall so they wouldn't be implicated in any ethical violations or seen as a threat to national security. Why would an affair be a matter of national security? He asked. Because if a hostile foreign power found out, they could easily be blackmailed. I shrugged as I laid it out for him. But now that it's all out in the open air, so to speak, I think that I've earned my right to be heard on this. My wife, for reasons unknown to me, began an affair with General Needledick out there. I can say for certain that sex wasn't the issue, nor was it lack of love or attention. If I had to venture a guess, I would say that she was attracted to his power as a general officer in the U.S. Army and as director of the CIA. That was when I heard the sirens approaching. It had taken them long enough. Apparently, whoever had called them had waited until they were quite certain that I was in here. Well, Mr. Lackland, I believe that my ride is here. I'll be surrendering shortly, it seems. However, before I do, I just want to say one thing. I said, What is it, Mr. Blakely? He asked. I'm sorry, Tali. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have sedated you. I paused. Mr. Lackland, please run that one on every newscast between now and tomorrow evening. I think that can be arranged, Mr. Blakely. Good luck to you, he said as I ended the call. So, it was now just a matter of luck. Well, I figured, my luck couldn't get that much worse. Hell, I had used up my lifetime allotment of good luck here tonight. Being able to pull off my revenge on a scolio and swine woman, I poured another 3 fingers of the superb scotch and puffed one more time on the stogie. I picked up my trusty Colt from my lap, ejected the magazine, and racked the slide, ejecting the live round. I then placed the round in the magazine and made sure the slide was locked back. I set both on the desk, then did the same with the MP5. When the SWAT team busted down the front door, I stubbed out the cigar and downed the rest of the scotch in the glass. I replaced the top on the bottle and stood up with my hands in the air. The first man through the door saw that I was already in surrender position, so he had his buddies cover him and moved forward to slap the cuffs on me. He then advised me of my Miranda rights, and I acknowledged when asked if I understood. I exercised my right to remain silent, only breaking that to say that I wanted an attorney and my one phone call. For my attorney, I told them to get Rick Sanderson, and for my phone call, I called Tali's burner. She picked up on the 5th ring. Harrow? She said groggily. Good. The tranquilizer had worn off. Finally. Tali, it's me. Look, I'm sorry for what I did, but there was a good reason for that. I said in a low voice. You drugged me. She slurred. Yes, I did. I didn't want you following me and getting locked up with me. I'm in jail right now, but if you want the full story, watch the news. Patrick Lackland on Channel 10 got my exclusive interview, in case you were wondering. I smiled in spite of myself. It was all out in the open now. Nothing hidden like Paula and her general a-hole would have wanted. John, I'm coming to bail your sorry bum out of jail. Then I'm gonna kick your butt up one side and down the other. She threatened, her voice now perfectly fine. Yeah, her adrenaline burned off the rest of the tranquilizer in record time. And I'll let you kick my butt up one side and down the other as many times as you want. At least I managed to keep you out of jail, and that's worth it to me. I smiled, and she chuckled on the other end of the line. Okay, smartass. I'll be there in the morning. I have the number on my caller ID, so I'll be there in a while. She said, Thanks, sweetie. I really do owe you one. I smiled. See you in the morning. Bye, John. I'll be there soon. She hung up. I was shown back to the holding cell, and was thrown into one by myself. I guess word had gotten around that I may pose a danger to other inmates. I could live with that. I did push-ups, sit-ups, and even pull-ups by tilting the bunk beds on end and using the bar at the head of the top one to do my exercises. Once I was done, I caught an hour-long combat nap and was up and ready in time for my arraignment. I was cuffed and led to the courtroom. Rick was already there and just chuckled and shook his head when he saw me. Rick and I had met in college, where he was going to law school. He had moved out to Virginia several years after Paula and I moved, but we had regained touch with him and his new wife, Amelia. She's a sweetheart, so there was no swinging going on. Rick is kind of like me. He doesn't share. I couldn't blame him one bit. I also was going to ask him to handle my divorce. We managed to talk for about 5 minutes before the judge got there, and he agreed to handle my divorce for me. Once Judge Reinhold, no relation, came in, he said to be seated, and Rick made a very persuasive argument for me to be released on my own recognizance. When asked why, I stood and recounted that I had been made a scapegoat for my boss, General David Peterson, and my wife, his lover, Paula Blakely. I'd sent Rick the evidence in the email, and he had filed it away for future use. The judge saw things our way, due to exigent circumstances, and I was allowed to collect my personal effects. As I was walking out of the station with Rick, we were met by a very irate Talisa Martin. I smiled, and she slapped me across the face. I deserved that, I said, more for Rick's benefit than mine. You deserve a lot more than that, white boy, Talisa said as I rubbed my face. I agree. At least you didn't have to spend the night in there. I smiled as I hooked my thumb over my shoulder at the police station. For some odd reason, the feds didn't even show up to press their own case against me. They had to know that I'd been caught, but they were keeping their distance, for the time being, of course. At least I got my Colt back after showing them my CIA ID. It seems that in his haste to declare me enema of the state, General Dipshit had failed to fire me officially. So I just smiled, accepted my granddad's sidearm back, and walked out of there to be met by my aforementioned assistant and possible lover, who was really pissed off at me at that particular moment. Her expression softened, and she threw her arms around me, hugging me tight. "Never do that again," she commanded, and it was a command that I would be more than happy to follow. "I won't, as long as I don't have a reason to do it," I promised. "Good, because I don't want you in jail or worse," she exclaimed. The charges against me were dropped due to extenuating circumstances, for which I was grateful. The FBI got them dropped, strangely enough. It seemed that General Peterson was going to be called before Congress to testify as to his affair and the threat to national security that it had caused. The kicker was the recordings I sent to all the news networks, posted them on YouTube, and identified the director of the CIA and my soon-to-be ex-wife. My Camaro was still where I had parked it the night before, and after I picked it up, I followed Talisa home. My house had nothing I really wanted. Hell, I'd made sure I took everything I wanted when I ran. She handed me a spare key when we got there, and when I went inside, I removed my wedding ring and threw it in the garbage. As far as I was concerned, Paula and I were already divorced. Talisa saw me do it. "Hey John, does that mean what I think it means?" she asked. "Tali, it means that as far as I'm concerned, Paula no longer exists. Rick is having her served today, wherever she is. Hell, most likely shacked up with her a-hole lover. I'm giving her nothing but the house. Screw alimony, screw spousal maintenance, or whatever they call it. She owes me that much. Hell, I'm pretty sure her folks have seen the evidence now too." I smirked. I turned my cell phone off preemptively to make sure that I wouldn't be receiving any calls from her irate folks. "Honey, I know I'll probably just end up a rebound sex toy, but shit, I want you," Talisa said as she moved up into my arms. She stroked my bearded cheek and then took my hand with a smile. "Come with me, baby. I think I could do that." I smiled back and let her lead me to her bedroom and the bathroom attached to it. She sat me down on the toilet seat, then lathered up my face with shave gel. She then proceeded to shave me, her hands gentle and the blade steady. She looked into my dark blue eyes with her dark chocolate orbs, and we smiled at each other as she finished cleaning off my face. Of all the things I'd done over the years with Paula, nothing was quite that intimate as allowing Talisa to shave me. After she finished, she leaned down and kissed me tenderly. "Now it's shower time," she smiled, pointing me toward the shower. "I'll grab some towels." I rinsed, soaked up, and heard the shower door slide open when Talisa returned with the towels. She grinned as my eyes bugged out of my head at the sight of her. Her dark chocolate skin was flawless. Her slender waist flares out to wide hips and the best damn I've ever seen in my life. She didn't say a word as she came into my arms, rubbing her body up against my soapy torso. Our lips and tongues met again, and we kissed as if it was our last day on earth. Our moans grew louder as our need for each other grew stronger. We made love. By the time we were done, the water started cooling off, so I shut down the shower and we toweled each other dry. These were intimacies that I had never experienced before with anyone, including Paula. Paula and I had a great sex life, and it had been very fulfilling. But this level of intimacy that I had discovered today with Talisa was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. We screwed and made love 3 more times that day, and after each time, we talked more and more about who we were and what we wanted out of life. She confessed to a crush that had lasted since we'd first met and I'd taken over the Cyber Warrior division. I confessed that she was the only woman to turn my head, even when I was in love with Paula. We laughed at that and figured out that we were pretty much meant to be together. I cautioned her that we would have to take it slow, and friends with benefits was good for now. She nodded and said she understood. 6 months later, we were back with our team in Cyber Warrior IT at the CIA, and Talisa became more than my assistant. We became lovers first, more than just friends with benefits, and as soon as my divorce from Paula was final, I asked Tali to marry me. She said yes with tears flowing down her face, and I took great pleasure in slipping the ring on her finger. Paula moved back west after the divorce. I gave her nothing, and she asked for nothing. We split the house sale equally, and that was pretty much it. She kept her car, and I kept mine. I love my Camaro. General Peterson was served with his divorce papers soon after Paula was served with hers, and his wife took him to the cleaners. I gave her every scrap of evidence I had on them both, and the judge was more than pissed off about the circumstances that the general had put everyone in. He was forced to resign as director of the CIA for, you guessed it, national security reasons. It seemed my point about his having an affair was taken seriously by the president himself, and soon a new director was appointed. The general almost faded away, but he decided that he wanted a little revenge on me before he left town. That was his biggest mistake, and he was rushed to the hospital after assaulting me. He ended up in the hospital for a few weeks, and when he was released, he really did fade away. Nobody ever saw or heard from him again. Paula and I have talked a few times, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to see her. Tali and I invited her to our wedding, but she never showed up. Oh well, last I heard, she was up in Seattle someplace. Whatever. As for Tali and I, we were married, as I just mentioned, and we moved back to Los Angeles together. She introduced me to her family, and I transferred from the CIA to the FBI's LA field office. Talisa resigned outright from the CIA, and she just announced to me that she's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. When I look back on the life I had with Paula, it pales in comparison to the life that Tali and I have now made with each other. I've never been happier in my life. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.